Good afternoon and welcome to the Is Your Technology Ready for Common Core Assessments webinar. My name is Cindy Cazanes. I'm the Director for the Educational Data Management Division. We will be responding to questions, so for those of you that are logged in on the site and have your names listed and email addresses, that's a great way for us to get back to you after the webinar is concluded. So just an aside, that's available to you. This webinar should last approximately an hour. We're going to switch between a couple of different presentations, so there'll be a couple of pauses during the webinar just for you to be aware of. So to begin with, the purpose of this webinar, we've done actually, I think this is the fourth or fifth in a series, to help LEAs prepare for Smarter Balance assessments by making sure that you have the proper tools to not only complete the technology readiness tool, but also to make sure that you have an understanding of what is available through the assessments and how you need to prepare for them. And today's webinar is a bit unique. We've brought in two outside individuals who we think are leaders in the field, especially in the Sacramento area, if not statewide, one from a county perspective and one from a local perspective. So I'm going to go into that slide next on who they are. But before that, I just want to give just a bit of a disclaimer. So the department in no way has discussed about preferences of purchasing devices or how LEAs should approach the readiness when it comes to procurement of tools. And so what you'll hear today is, I think, some suggestions on how it's worked for certain districts and county offices. And it'll give you an opportunity, I think, again, to question these individuals on why this worked for them and what kind of process they did to go through to make sure they were purchasing information or purchasing rather tools that were right for their districts with with the appropriate approval processes. So that with that, I would like to introduce our two presenters, or rather, you'll hear from them very shortly. So John Fleshman, who's an Assistant Superintendent of Technology Services from Sacramento County Office of Education, and Carl Foley, Senior Director for Technology Services from San Juan Unified School District. And before we bring both of them on to talk about what they've been doing to get ready for Smarter Balance, we're going to walk through just a couple of background slides on where we are, how we got to where we are, and the legislation that brought us to this place. I'm going to turn this over to Jose Ortega, who's the Administrator for the Education Technology Office.
Good afternoon, everyone. To set the stage now for our presenters, Assembly Bill 484 established a new student assessment system, the California Measurement of Academic Performance and Progress, also referred to as CalMAP. This is what is causing us to have this conversation today. And in preparation for this system, there is an awful lot of preparation that's going to take place, not only for assessment for the technology and for how we prepare then for not only the field test, but also for the ongoing assessment. The intent is to provide full funding of all the Smarter Balance assessment, the components for the 2014-15 and beyond, and it requires all of the schools to participate in the Smarter Balance field testing in spring of 2014. Of course, this requires a lot of preparation, not only of the technology, but also in the way that the folks in technology and the assessment and curriculum and instruction. So there is an awful lot to prepare. The Smarter Balance Spring 2014 field test is going to require the Smarter Balance field test in ELA and math for students in grades 3 through 8. And for students in grades 11, 5% will take only the ELA or math in one performance task for one subject, and 95% of the students will take both ELA and math items in one performance task for one subject. Testing is conducted within assigned 6-week windows from March 18 through June 6, 2014, and most of you have and should have already received your assigned testing window. Approximately 3.5 hours in testing time. No student test scores will be reported. And the purpose of the assessment is to further research and test the items and test the system. An all-out test of the technology is needed to deliver the assessments. So that's what John and Carl will be speaking about, and they are going to tell us exactly how they're going to do this. John, can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Absolutely. So let's switch seats here, and thank you again. Thank you for the introduction, Cindy. And again, my name is John Fleischman, and I'm with the County Office of Education, and I've been involved with SBAC on a couple of different levels. I've been privileged to be a member of the Architectural Review Board and work with Rodney Okamoto here at the department. I have a great deal of respect for. It's a huge challenge in terms of designing the system and the underlying technology that's involved. And I've also been very actively involved with CSESA, which is the County Superintendents Association. There's a subcommittee known as the Technology and Telecommunications Subcommittee, and leading some of the discussions among the county offices of education. So what I'd like to cover today is kind of a broader scope, and then drill down to some of the specifics that we're doing at the county office as it relates to implementation. And then Carl will be following up from the district perspective. So I'd like to start with some of the challenges and issues from the 2013 pilot test of the system. I'd like to touch a little bit on just some of the more salient points from the SBAC Technology Framework and Specifications document, the ones I think are especially important for us here in California. A brief overview of the initial data collection for the technology readiness tool, and then touch on some of the ways that we are leveraging the TRT results, both locally, what we're doing in the county office, and some of the ways I think it's important statewide. So with that, let me start with some of the challenges. Now, let me preface this by saying I think overall the pilot test done in the spring was amazingly successful. And I think most schools, most agencies that were involved in the pilot test had a very positive and good experience. And I spoke with about 20 different agencies, got some information from schools in the Central Valley, Sacramento area, down south, and by no means, a little disclaimer there at the bottom, a very unscientific anecdotal review of the SBAC scientific pilot test. But I'd like to share some of my perspectives in terms of some of the interface and design issues related to the system, which we need to be aware of, many of which have been resolved or will be resolved by SBAC, some of the issues that rose to the surface in terms of network connectivity, computer hardware, and the all-important technical support. So let me start, first of all, with some of the design issues. Those of you that are involved in any type of web development know how challenging it is to build this type of a system. Some of the frustrations that were expressed by some of those that were involved in the original pilot test was the lack of full word processor functionality within the delivery system, the inability of the browser to do cut, paste, undo, select all, and so on, and highlighting and the ability to highlight text. Another one of the issues, and just again, because it's different, trying to replicate all the kinds of things you're not going to be able to replicate as efficiently in developing this kind of an interface with something like some big corporations. There's definitely some issues with scrolling, dragging, dropping on computers without mouse controls, especially netbooks. This perhaps is less of an issue, and I think certainly kids are going to take right to this, but the manipulation of media when the full system is implemented, some of the abilities to control, pause, rewind, manipulating some of the learners in the pilot test found that rather challenging. This is an interesting one, and I've seen some comments in some of the listservs. The variables between screen size. I mean, we're all aware now that the real estate, the screen size of the test is very important, and those that are using iPads, it's necessary to have a keyboard, preferably a hardwired keyboard. But there certainly is some variables that I've, in talking to some folks, some challenges between the small screen delivery system, a 10-inch screen, versus a large 21-inch large screen display. And just as an example, you can see the kind of display. The small screen required more scrolling to reveal the content, more manipulation by the user. And then with the large screen, it was kind of an interesting one. Some of the assessments timed out when there was no interaction with the content, simply because that reading selection was displayed in its entirety there on the screen. And again, I've not talked with Smarter Balance, and these kinds of issues may have already been addressed in some fashion. This is an issue, and I just saw a post on the FECTA listserv the other day. The ability to adjust audio is a concern. Once they're in that dedicated browser, need to step back out of that browser in order to adjust the volume control on the headsets. So that is a potential interface design issue that may or may not be addressed. In terms of computer hardware, the challenges were with classrooms that had multiple computer makes and models. Certainly frustrating for the teacher where they didn't have test support, and that's of course the reality in many of our schools. Many of us have computers going back 8, 9, 10, and even more years. And then hopefully now some of the issues with too few computers are being resolved, and I'm certainly hearing, like many of you on this webinar are hearing, there are significant purchases being made with the one-time Common Core dollars. In terms of network connectivity, we are so blessed here in California to have the K-12 HSN, the high-speed network that's administered out of the Imperial County Office of Education. It's been around for about 10 years. And what that network does is provides us a real solid backbone that connects all county offices and some other large school districts. I believe there are about 72 total nodes on the network. So the network is actually the envy of many other states' K-12 system because of how robust it is. Internet is purchased in quantity, so there's one buy for internet service that's fed over the network. Where things begin to break down is once the connectivity goes from districts out to school sites. And that's some of the feedback that came on the network connectivity. And I'll get into some numbers in just a minute. But where some of the inconsistency is school site connectivity, so how those are connected. And clearly, some schools that rely on wireless access points, either inadequate access points or underpowered ones, certainly was something that was shown during the pilot test of an issue for some schools. Again, only some schools. One of the significant issues, which we're probably all going to be dealing with, is the technical support issues. That we can't expect test proctors to be both efficient in delivering the assessment and to have the necessary technical skills. And for many of our schools, we simply don't have enough tech support. So when there will be testing going on in multiple locations in a single district, unfortunately, those support technicians can't clone themselves. So that's going to be, could be a potential challenge within many districts. Spacing in the computer labs. I never really thought about this, and perhaps it's less important than in the older days when every student, in the old days, I'm already referring to it as the old days, but when every student received basically a similar test and we were concerned about students looking over the shoulders, this is a computer adaptive test. So theoretically, all the test items come from an item bank and no two students will see the same items at any one time. So it's probably less of a concern. But certainly, in many of the schools that I've been in, they're tightly packed and maybe 25, 30 computers in a lab. That seemed to be an issue that some were concerned about. Things like this, login process was challenging for some. That can certainly be addressed, and I know that others have come up with some solutions, but that there is obviously, you all know, there's a unique ID for each student that's going to be required. And then this other issue, and many are gearing up for this, the little guys, the little ones, don't have the necessary keyboarding skills. And again, on some of the listservs, I've seen a lot of discussions going on, well, what kind of software would you use? And so there's much more of an awareness now of increasing keyboarding skills, especially among the little ones. So those are some of the issues that surfaced in terms of the pilot test. Many of those are resolved. And like I said, again, that's very anecdotal. Many schools had a very, very positive experience. Most schools had a very positive experience, and some are figuring out ways to address some of these other issues. One of the cornerstone documents, I think, that for information about what is necessary to have for delivering the system is included in the SBAC document. It's the Technology Strategy Framework and System Requirement Specifications. And I know Jose and Cindy have talked about this document and Rodney in previous webcasts, but to me this is really the Bible, because this really calls and identifies the specific minimum requirements, but also talks about and identifies the ideal kind of environment for hardware, software, bandwidth requirements, and there's other information in the guides. There is a full guide. There is an executive summary as well, and then for top-level administrators, there's a nice little handout with little icons and graphics. That's good. So you certainly want to be sure that top administrators and districts, at the very least, look at the very surface-level document to get the basic information that's required. And this document has been updated several times. The most recent update was on February 6th. So be sure and look at that document if you've not already seen that. I guess the biggest concern for me is bandwidth. I think most districts are in pretty good shape, but according to some of the data that has come back in through K-12 HSN Data Link, we still have a significant number of schools out there with a T1, and fortunately, most districts have relatively robust connections. But if you look on the Framework Specifications document, I think this is an important caveat. A school that implements only the minimum specifications, bandwidth and computers, will be able to implement SBAC successfully. But individual testing experience for any particular student may have periods of slowness during which the computer experienced brief moments of data lag or delay, which will not disable the exam but will merely result in the system taking a few additional seconds to capture student responses and render the next question item. So, to me, it is about connectivity. In the best possible of all worlds, we'd have a minimum of 100 megabits to every school in California. And you may have seen in the press the other day, the Facebook and Gates Foundations, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates have contributed, I think it was $6 million or $9 million to the education superhighway, because they also realize the importance. And as most of you know as well, this discussion is going on at the federal level as far as E-rate and the potential of significantly upgrading funds, with the President's goal of having a minimum of 100 megabit. And I think that's something we need to strive for. And if you look at this chart, sure, SBAC says 10 to 20 kilobits per student required for the test. When they first launch, it will jump up. So let's figure 100 students that you're going to be testing simultaneously is 1,000 kilobits per second, or 1 megabit. A T1 is 1.54 megabit. But how many T1s are not being nailed to the limit all day long, doing student information systems, doing instructional systems, other use going on? So that certainly is a concern for those schools that are on the lower spectrum. So I think schools certainly need to look very carefully at what their current bandwidth utilization is, what they need to plan for, and go ahead and work out the numbers. I mean, this is something that's especially important, the numbers of students that will be simultaneously tested. Again, I would give a bit more headroom than that 10 kilobits per student, but certainly you need to be very aware of that. The technology readiness tool. It's a little disheartening to me that we don't have a real strong response. And I'm well aware of all the reasons. Everybody is out there. Being a technical person and for the county office, I understand the difficulty that places to go out and to inventory the machines if you don't have an automated system, to look at devices to test, or to do the detailed work on network infrastructure, to look carefully and to assess where we are with staff and personnel readiness. But honestly, and many schools say, well, I don't have the time, I know we're not going to have a problem. But the bottom line is it's very difficult to get where you need to be if you don't know where you currently are. So I think it's a valuable tool. I think the department has done a great job promoting it, and I would urge you, if you've not completed the technology readiness tool, to go in to enter the data. There's 3 remaining extraction windows. There's one this Friday coming up real fast. There's one on June 13th of next year, and the final one will be on August 18th. And I'll get to a few slides of why I think this is important, how I've used the data at the County Office of Education, and why I think it's especially important with policymakers and legislators, the ones that are allocating dollars for our important needs. So it's not just what happens locally, and it's a tool for you locally, but it's also incredibly valuable. That data, decisions are made by data, and we just don't have enough detailed information at this point in time. The first survey was done back in spring of 2012, and it was used as a baseline data point for SBAC development. So based upon that information, and that initial survey that was done here in California, we actually had a reasonable response. I believe was up in 42%.
42, 43.
Yeah, which is pretty good. But again, that was used as a baseline, and that was now, what, a year and a half ago? So a period of time. But the more recent data collections are that useful. Again, like I said, it's very useful for developing your planning process within the district. It's really nice to have these one-time Common Core dollars. As Carla and I was talking earlier, you need to create awareness among your administration. Technology is not one-time investments. There's a total cost of ownership here. And I think through this process we can create greater awareness. The initial survey that was done, and this was one of the things that jumped out to me, 614,000 devices were entered into the system. And if you look at those numbers, Windows XP, 52%. No surprise there, right? But as most of you know as well, Microsoft will no longer be supporting XP after April of 2014. Now, the assessment will still be able to be delivered using Microsoft XP. I believe it's extended out another full year, so it won't be problematic on that. But certainly, a couple of years down the road, those machines clearly will need to be upgraded. And then with bandwidth in the initial survey, about 15% of schools were identified at 2 megabits per second or less, so around a T1 or less. And that, as I said earlier, that self-reported data, I believe K-12 HSN has identified about 700 sites or so that have a T1 or less. Those would be of real concern. This one jumped out for me. There's lots of different data. It's very useful information. But this one, staff and personnel issues, having sufficient number of technology support staff to support online testing. In the little chart there, you can see the 10 scale, but basically it boils down to about 63% are concerned that they don't have adequate technology support staff. Something you certainly need to think about, and how you can leverage or scale support, which may include providing more training for a frontline assessment to deal with assessors, to deal with real initial kinds of problems. So tiered tech support is, I think, going to be very, very important. So why is it important and useful to complete the TRT? Well, I found it very useful to help get the communication going at the local level, to leverage that information to help make better decisions about expenditures. And again, just informally talking with some of my peers, one-time Common Core dollars are being spread awfully thin. Certainly you have a lot of needs for those, but there are many competing purposes. So that gives you more of an argument internally to address some of the concerns. On a larger scale, though, it's the aggregated data for state policy and funding. And that's going to really, what I think, if we get a better completion rate, give us better information to help inform the policymakers. So at the local level, I used it. We're, again, a county office, so we don't do a lot of direct student instruction. We have community schools. We have court schools, upwards of about 1,000 students during the year. About 9 years ago, I was given a significant chunk of money in lottery dollars. The majority of our devices are now 9 years old. hardly a week goes by that I don't have a failure. We're cannibalizing parts. We've got the kids in juvenile hall destroying the machine. So it's a constant challenge just keeping things going. We decided a couple of years ago to go with virtualizing our data center. Now we're virtualizing the desktop. Frankly, we think it's a perfect solution for our assessment situation. We can quickly reposition those devices in different locations. We reset those devices on a daily basis. So what the information, by us completing the TRT, it allowed me to use that information with our managers and to accelerate the VDI rollout. So it's been very useful for me at the Sacramento County Office of Education to help inform and educate our cabinet members on the importance of having adequate devices for administering SBAC assessments. And then at the state level, you know, fortunately, we are in a very good position here. It's looking kind of bright after, what, 5-6 years now of the economy being very depressed. A couple of weeks ago, the Legislative Analyst's Office came out with California's fiscal outlook, and it's looking promising. Now, you know, everyone's going to be at the trough looking, and the governor is going to be, you know, debating which way to go. But clearly, if we had broader information, more reliable information on a broader basis, we know we have problems with last-mile connectivity. We know there's still going to be a shortage of appropriate devices and, without question, adequate technical support. So I would propose to you that if we get greater completion, better information, and we can increase, at least get a 50% response. I think we stand at about 18% right now, a little above that in terms of response to the TRT. I think we can use that data to help inform policymakers and perhaps another one-time funding, which is not going to solve all of our problems, or maybe we can convince policymakers that a good investment would be to chip in and let's really move towards a 100 megabit connection for every school. So to me, that is very valuable information. I think that will be extremely useful to us. So at that point, I am going to turn it back to Jose, who will switch the slide deck.
So, John, before you move on, can I ask you to maybe just speak briefly? You spoke about how you collect the TRT information for your County Office of Education, and you spoke briefly about the collection of TRT and how that may have an impact on the state as a whole. How does the TRT information that you look at on the overall county school districts, and what does that mean to your county office? Do you look at the school districts within your county, and what does that mean to your office? And are there impacts to what you do and services that you provide at a county office of education?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that we do at Sacramento County Office of Education is we maintain a separate high-band, high-speed network basically for Sacramento County. So all of the districts are connected to us through a fiber optic network courtesy of basically our local cable companies. We leveraged our cable franchise agreement, and we're able to build high-speed connections out to all of our districts. They, in turn, then provide connectivity back to their school sites. So we're able to use that data to kind of assess, and we monitor that network at all times. So, for example, Carl, just a couple of weeks ago, said, John, my gigabit connection is getting relatively impacted. So I've been working internally here, and we're now, that's part of the information that comes back from that assessment process, also other information, but we're taking that information and working now towards leveraging a 10 gigabit connection for San Juan. But similarly, we connect that information, we're able to monitor the traffic. And again, we think that is the foundation for delivery of the assessments. Remember that as we move towards a smarter balance, that system can break down anywhere, the point from the classroom to the district to the county office. Fortunately, we've got that real strong backbone. So that TRT information is useful for us to have a better picture of where the connectivity is, where the potential problems are.
So right. Thank you, John.
You bet.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We're going to move on now to Carl. And you are right there. Full screen. Carl,
Excellent.
You're the driver now.
Great, thank you. So really what I'm going to share this afternoon is a story of one school district's efforts to prepare for smart and balanced online assessments, but really within a larger context of our staying focused on what our instructional priorities are. So I'm the Senior Director of Technology for San Juan Unified School District. We, a large district, serves the northeast area of Sacramento County, approximately 80 square miles, 70 schools, touching 9 cities, and about 40,000 students. And our district had a community-developed strategic plan that we developed a number of years ago that really creates the foundation. So we were just providing a good example of what it could be like in the classroom without sufficient preparation for online testing. I'm just teasing, of course. I think we have audio and we're back on, so I will continue where we left off. So I was talking about how, again, our rollout for preparation for Smarter Balance was really framed from the context of our district strategic plan, framed from the context of student learning and powering teacher opportunities as being really a big framework for everything that we were doing. So San Juan has actually been dabbling in online computer adaptive assessments as far back as 2005. We partnered with NWEA, Northwest Evaluation Associates, who have a measure of academic progress system that was computer-based and have grown it a little bit over the years, but it was really last year, the 12-13 school year, where we in preparation for Smarter Balance, in part, really decided to do a broader pilot of the assessment system throughout more of the schools. So a little less than half the schools participated in this online measure of academic progress assessment. And it was a voluntary participation, and it really included a lot of self-assessment. The schools had to determine whether or not they had internal capacity in terms of staff who would be able to support it or feel comfort with it, and also in terms of self-evaluation of the technology that they had available to participate in the pilot at all. And then, of course, that really provided a lot of information to inform us in terms of taking an initiative to do a district-wide rollout of this online assessment for the current school year, of which we have done. We are actually in the second session of our interim assessment. So we brought forward this initiative, Bridging STAR to Smarter Balance Assessments, and we really brought it forward from the lens of 2 key instructional objectives. The first was we wanted to implement a system-wide interim formative assessment system to support our strategic plan and key learning objectives. And the second piece was to ensure adequate infrastructure and computing devices to support, and again, you're not going to see Smarter Balance here, but really to support digital literacy and other computer-assisted learning experiences identified with the Common Core. So really the driver was about formative assessment and about preparation for Common Core 21st century learning. Now, we did have some additional pieces that we wanted to look at, and this is what we call our stress test, and really a big part of this was providing an opportunity for the entire San Juan community, staff, students, parents, administration, to really have an opportunity to experience online computer adaptive assessment across the system. Because what we knew is that we were going to have more stresses in the system beyond just the computing devices and our network infrastructure and our pipes out to the internet. We knew a lot of the stress would be in terms of human capacity, human comfort, and so that was really a big part of our goal. So last year, we went forward in the spring to the Board of Education, basically with plans to roll out our online assessment through NWEA district-wide, and leveraging the information that we got back from the technology readiness tool to help us ask for and make recommendations on the hardware that we thought would be supportable for this assessment. So on the screen you have before you some of the data that we got back after doing the first assessment from the technology readiness tool. And I just want to point out a couple pieces of information here. We did have about half of the district computing devices met the minimum requirements, but you will see 1% of the devices met the recommended requirements. When you go down to our eligible test takers who could be testing on devices, yes, a little more than half were eligible on the minimum requirements, but only about 3% of eligible test takers would be testing on existing devices based on the recommended requirements. So clearly, we saw a huge gap in terms of our capacity with computing devices from when we did this assessment on the technology readiness tool to where we are now. And so this was important data, and it was data that we actually used when we went to administration, when we went to cabinet, when we went to the Board of Education, and I think that's key. Okay. So in terms of our strategic decision, the instructional requirements, I alluded to this a little bit earlier. Really, we wanted technology to support Common Core and 21st century applications of technology. We really were looking at this idea of flexible, simple, reliable, and integrated and transportable, because as we started thinking about, okay, where would we like to invest our energy, where would we like to invest our money, what types of technology, would it be hardwire, would we be building out the labs, or would we be looking at wireless connectivity and wireless devices? And really the driver for this was just looking at the trends in the world. Where are we going in terms of students accessing information? Well, they pull it out of their pocket. When they're at home, they're sitting on the couch with their tablet otherwise. And we really became very clear and evident that if we're talking about technology being transparent within the classroom and supportive, that wireless connectivity offers the greatest flexibility and the greatest opportunities, and plus it really addresses a lot of the heavy-duty logistics around having one or two spaces in a campus, a lab, or other, and trying to schedule that and use it. So the decision was made to really focus on an approach that involved a really reliable and comprehensive wireless infrastructure. With this, obviously, we had to think about professional development, and I was thinking about the people who have joined the conference this afternoon, and I'm wondering what percentage of the folks on that call are technology folks, and what percentage are from the teaching and learning side of the house. And so I want to be very clear that when we did this initiative, we did it in absolute partnership with our teaching and learning department, that this was not a technology services initiative. It was a collaborative, and Dr. Donna O'Neill, the Director of Assessment, Evaluation, and Planning at San Juan, she and her team were instrumental in leading this effort and being part of that conversation, and it really, I think it's really important to call out for everybody who's looking at this that you have to get buy-in and ownership from your teaching and learning, your curriculum departments, and not just technology being the ones who are looking at this information. It's pretty critical. So moving through professional development support, one of the pieces I want to call out on this slide here is the fact that when we started doing the preliminary training for our district-wide rollout of the MAP assessment, we wanted to do more than just make sure that our technology computer support staff knew how to help people with the hardware. We knew they needed to know how to help people once they were online and inside the environment. So it was critical to educate everybody, not just on the computing device, but on the online environment. And on the same time, we worked with our curriculum folks, our teaching and learning staff, to make sure that they were familiar with the hardware, that they were comfortable with the nuances of how to refresh a cache or reboot a computer, or what to do when a student presses a key and the whole screen turns sideways. So it was really an overlap of training and knowledge and support, and very importantly, ongoing. This is not a one-time training and then, okay, we've done the training, we're good. This is ongoing. It's really systemic to how we were moving. And then the other piece I think that's really important, and this was another conversation we had when we went to the board, is that historically, investment in hardware and technology would often come through a one-time fund, and people would say, okay, here's your money, invest your equipment, and great, you're done. It's going to last for the next 100 years. We don't have to worry about it again. And the reality is, just like your car, you know, it requires maintenance, and it's going to eventually break down, and you're going to have to repair it and replace it. And so we really, when we made the decision to go with Chromebooks, we weren't sure what quality these devices are, how long they would last. And so we went for a 2-year refresh on those devices. And because of the low cost of the device, that was significant in helping us make that decision. But that's with the idea that this needs to be a sustainable model. It needs to be an investment. It needs to be made just like you would invest in materials for paper, pencils, and books on an annual basis. You were making an investment in the hardware, in the infrastructure, and the professional development that you would need to have ongoing, not just for the Smarter Balance Online Assessment, but really for a transition to the Common Core, to digital literacy, and all of the pieces that entails. So that's a really important point when you have the conversations at your funding decision level, that you really talk about the fact that this cannot be one-time monies. Yeah, that'll get you started, but you really have to think systemically about how to keep it going. So here I'm just going to talk a little bit about some things that we learned. And I think the first bullet up there, culture is king. Clear and consistent communication is key. San Juan's a pretty large enterprise, and we have people spread across a very wide region. And we found out very clearly, and I think most people would intuit this, that those schools and staff that had access to technology and had used it previously were more comfortable. They had less issues at their school, and part of those issues were really just the ability to do simple troubleshooting. Do I need to refresh the browser? Do I need to restart the computing device? Do I need to try to reconnect to the wireless? Those things come with experience, and if you're a school that's had access to technology, the staff have some internal capacity to deal with those. At the schools where there was not as much computer use, the number of issues that we've dealt with were much higher, and it was because of just the lack of knowledge, the lack of comfort, the lack of ability to really troubleshoot for those things. So what we have found incredibly vital is communication to the schools, communication to administration, communication from administration to their staff, and keeping that open. And of course, we've leveraged some online technology to make sure that people can subscribe and be part of this communication, so they could really share collectively across the entire system the things that they've had troubles with, the things where they have found a lot of successes, and everybody's part of that online social networking, smarter balance environment to really share that work. And that has been significant for us. And again, we talked about some other things that we learned, some of the old test-taking strategies. For example, with paper and pencil, the strategy for teachers telling students, if you get stuck, just skip it, come back to it later. Well, on a computer-based adaptive assessment, that's a strategy that is probably no longer appropriate or relevant, right? So these are some shifts in terms of thinking, in terms of approach, and those really come with an opportunity to participate online. And, you know, Smarter Balance will happen one time a year, but what is your plan for giving your staff and your system an opportunity to practice and experience that throughout the course of the year? Because we are doing 3 times a year testing on the map, and every time we do another assessment, we find that we have to go back in and do a lot of prep, a lot of pre-training, because you forget it. If you don't do it every day, you forget, how do I log on, or what's the command to do this, or how do I reset the computer? And so whether you use the interim assessments that will be available through the Smarter Balance program, or some other type of system that gives your staff practice, I think that is critically important to think about how you can implement something like that, because really getting folks, your students, your staff, your parents, your community used to doing this and comfortable with the issues that will happen with technology, much like our phone system going down, and how you are patient, you can work through it. They have to have those opportunities to practice. So a very big, important learning that I think I can't overstate enough. At this point, the last bullet there, technology readiness tool, I'm just going to reemphasize that this information was very critical for us, knowing what our capacity was internally, and in taking that data and sharing it with the community, sharing it with the board, sharing it with cabinet, so that they had a clear picture of where we are and where we needed to go, and it provided the rationale and the support for how we needed to invest our funds. And so I would say, if you have an opportunity absolutely take advantage of it because this is a very helpful tool, and I think it could serve what you're trying to accomplish in a big way. So I am going to pass it back over to Jose.
Carl, thank you very much. And John, again, thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions come in, and I wonder if either one of you or you might want to take a look at a couple of these questions. Doris, would you mind just taking a look at a couple of these questions? Maybe read off a couple of these questions, and maybe you might want to, John and Carl, take a shot at these.
How are you funding the 2-year refresh? How are you funding the 2-year refresh for the Chromebook?
How are we finding it?
Funding.
Oh, funding it. Well, so that's actually a great question. Actually, a few years ago, our Board of Education made a decision to set aside some funds, which they really call the strategic reserves funds for the district strategic plan, but it was also within the context of knowing that where we're moving with technology, that obviously funds to purchase, whether build out the infrastructure or purchase the device was pretty significant. So we had some funds available. We did look at the cost to build out our computer labs and use computing devices in a hardwired infrastructure, and it turned out that the Chromebooks were the lowest cost device. We had some anxiety because of the connectivity with the wireless. It was a relatively new device, and so it was kind of a risk. The good news is we always had a plan to reevaluate on an annual basis whether Chromebooks were still the appropriate technology, and we will do that. Every year we're going to look and say, is this still the right device to use for this? Is a tablet more manageable and more cost-effective now and multi-purpose for other instructional goals? But in terms of the funding, it was some forward-thinking decisions from our leadership that had some funds available to us. But now it will be part of the built-in annual budget, and I think that's an important conversation to have. When I talked about the refresh, that if districts are looking at this as just, I'm going to throw some one-time money at it and then we'll be good to go, you're going to struggle with that moving forward, and it's much better to say, here is the cost to provide the technology. I mean, the build out of the infrastructure might be a big one-time upfront cost, but when you're talking about the computing devices, you need to look at those as just standard instructional materials and really plan for and invest in that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
There's another one about VDI too.
Go ahead and read that out.
What VDI tool are you looking at using? VDI tool?
For virtual desktops, we're using VMware, and we've been very happy with that thus far.
So I think we're right at the our 1 hour allocation, and unfortunately for Carl and John, I think our audience already knows who you are, and they can probably find you in the yellow pages. You probably can't. Yeah, you probably can't hide now. They know where you live, and they can find you, I'm sure, if there are additional questions. We are very happy that you were able to join us today, and unfortunately, we had a little bit of a power outage, and but we were able to get through most of our presentation. We want to make one last pitch effort, and John mentioned this, that on December 13th, we are going to have our next snapshot, readiness tool snapshot on December 13th. You have the entire day to try to get your data into the TRT, and we want to make you aware of the next two dates. Friday, June 13th of 2014. Please place those dates on your calendar, and Monday, August 18th of 2014. Those are the dates of the readiness tool snapshots. We want to make you aware of some very good resources. The TRT SBAC IT readiness at cde.ca.gov. If you do not have a login, please send us an email to join the email list, or if you lack a login, please send us an email, and we will be very happy to provide you a login. Also, you see some web pages, CDE Technology Readiness web page. There are a lot of resources there. CDE Assembly Bill 484 questions and answers. Again, a lot of resources. Contact the Education Technology Office, telephone number and email address. This webinar and PowerPoint presentations are going to be available on the CDE website. An email will be sent to all of the participants as soon as those presentations are archived and they become available. And one more resource for you, support and information. The Educational Testing Service has created a Technology Assistance Center, and they will be providing district support, outreach, and information to testing coordinators and district technology coordinators for the 2014 administration of CalMAP system. And they will also be providing assistance to the assessment and technology coordinators. Any questions related to the 2014 field test, they can be directed to the California Technical Assistance Center. They will be happy to provide assistance at 1-800-955-2954 or by email at caltech@ets.org. Again, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Goodbye.